Hey there, Sean Miller, Hipster Viz Ninja here. Thanks so much for joining in. In this video, I'm going to show you how to use parameter actions to compare 2 points for analysis in Tableau. Let's get to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and connect to Superstore data source here. Now this is the solution for Workout Wednesday 2023, week 25. And if you would like to take a look at my live stream, you can do that in the, I'll link that in the card and in the description below if you want to watch my live stream. This is the cleaned up quick version. So that's what this is. So the very first thing that we're going to do whenever we do this, the first thing we should do is let's go ahead and just make our, line chart, our trend chart. So we'll go ahead and drag order date. We'll change it to continuous week, and then we'll take sales, and we will make this a rolling 6-week average. So we'll go to quick table calc. We'll drag sum of sales, go to quick table calc moving average. We'll right click again and go edit table calculation, and we will bring up the how far back, how many previous values. So we'll go 5 values. The reason we go 5 and not 6 is because we're going to include the current value in our rolling statement. If you didn't want to include that, you could just uncheck that, and then it would just be the 5 previous. There's different use cases for that, depending on whether or not you need them. So we've got our 6-month moving average, or 6-week moving average here. The next thing we need to do is just drag out our category, which is right here. Drag that out, and now we've got the basic shape of the trend chart that we're going to be creating. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and go and create the parameters. So what we need to do now is go ahead and create a parameter here. We'll call this anchor date. It's going to be a date field. And the current value, let's look at our, no, it's not going to do that. Okay, so let's just do let's do December 12th of 2021. How about, yeah, that sounds good. April 12th, or December 12th, 2021. That's going to be our default value. That's going to be our default anchor date. Again, what we actually change it into is not really going to matter. We're going to create a second parameter, and this is going to be our comparison date. All right, so and I'm going to call this comparison date. It's going to change it into a date, and I'm going to choose, this can be, again, anything. I'm going to choose my birthday from the year previous. So August 24th, 2020. So we've got 2 fields in here. Let's go ahead and add those as reference lines to our line chart now. We'll do it per pane, and we'll just select anchor date. And then for the label, we'll do custom, and we'll just do field name, or field label. And then we'll do a colon, and then we'll just do the actual value. You can see that's popping up right down here, right? You can see that's showing up. We will make this line a little bit thicker and a little bit darker. So let's go ahead and bring the opacity up just a bit, just so people see, just so the end users know that this is what we're doing. This is the anchor date. Now let's right click on that axis again, and let's add another reference line, but this time it's going to be the comparison date. And again, we'll do the label is the same thing. We'll do field label colon value. And again, you can see that populating right here. For this line is actually going to be a dashed line. So we'll change dashed line here, and we'll just go ahead and keep the opacity because we want it to be there. We don't want it to get in the way. We don't want it to have the same weight as our anchor date. So there we go. All right, next thing I'm going to do is, you see how these are on the same they're both at the bottom of the pane. We need to change this so that they're not overlapping when we get really close to each other. So let's format the alignment of our comparison date. So we'll right click on our comparison date reference line. We'll click format, and then we'll go to alignment, and we'll do the top. Just like that. Now, while we're here, let's go ahead, before we go any further, let's make these interactive, right? So what we're going to do, what's going to happen is we want to set our anchor date based on what we click on, and then we want our comparison date to change based on whatever date we hover on. So let's do a worksheet action since we're on a worksheet. Click on actions. We'll do change parameter. And this one will be change anchor. That'll be the name of it. And then here's a quick tip for you. Quick tip in Tableau here. If you want to carry through your worksheet actions to your dashboard whenever you create it, instead of having to recreate all of your actions, you can. Here's a quick tip for you. So in your source sheets, by default, it's going to default to this sheet. And this is a relic of times in Tableau when there were no dashboards. Yes, you heard me. There was a time in Tableau where dashboards were not an option, and this is one of this is one of the relics of that. So what we're going to do is what happens right now is we have this action is only going to be on this worksheet, and it's a different thing. It's a different component whenever it gets put on a dashboard. So that's why your worksheet actions don't always carry through to your dashboards. So the way to get around that is click on your source sheet drop down here and select Sample Superstore. All right. So now what we've done is we've selected the data source as the worksheet, as the source, and then we're just selecting the worksheet from that data source. And now anytime we use that worksheet in a dashboard or anything like that, this action will carry through. So the target parameter is going to be the anchor date, and the source field is going to be the week of order date, no aggregation, and we're going to keep the current value when it's deselected, and we're going to run the action on select, meaning click. And now we're just going to do the exact same thing, except we're going to change it to change comparison. We're going to set it up the exact same way. We select our data source, select our sheet. This one is going to run on hover. And then the target parameter is going to be the comparison date, and the field is going to be the week of order date. No aggregation, keep the current value. Click OK. And now let's do some tests to make sure that this is working. So we'll just hover, and you can see as I hover, you can see my dashed line, my comparison line, updating to what we want, right? So this is working. And then if we want to be like, this is what I want as my anchor, I will click on that mark, and you can see that my solid line, my anchor date line, also updates, right? All right, so we can just leave this here for now. Everything's good. All right, so we've done everything we need to do. Next thing, we need to figure out how to draw those sloped lines. How do we draw the sloped line? Well, there's a couple of different ways that we can draw lines in Tableau. The first one is obviously with an order date or some sort of a date field. And if we try and do that, if we try and isolate that, what Tableau is going to try and do is it's going to try and draw a line between these points, but we'll have nulls in between. So the way that we're actually going to do this is we're going to use measure names and measure values to draw the line between 2 points, any 2 points. So let's go ahead and create a calculated field, and we'll call this anchor date sales. All right. And then what we're going to do is we'll come down here and paste that in here. And then I will bump all this up so that you all can see it. and we'll talk through a little bit of what this is doing, right? So we're saying for anchor date sales, if the anchor date parameter is equal to the attribute of the week of the truncated week of order date, then return the window average of sum of sales going back 5, keeping the current value. Else return null. Right? So let's talk about a few things in this calculated field here, right? First thing, we got to figure out why we have to do this adder. Why do we have to do the attribute? Why can't we just do not that? Why do we have to wrap truncated week and order date? Why do we have to do that at all? Well, the reason is because we're returning a window function, and by default a window function is a table calculation, and table calculations are aggregated, and therefore everything in the calculated field needs to be at the same level of aggregation, either not aggregated or aggregated, right? So since we've aggregated this, we've got to aggregate every other field in our calculated field. Anchor date is a parameter. We do not need to aggregate that. Could we? Sure. Do we need to? No. So let's don't. Week of order date. That's our date dimension. And so there's a couple different ways you can aggregate. One, you can do it with min, max, average, sum. All those different things are aggregates, right? Sum's not going to work because you don't sum dates. Min and max are not going to work because the minimum is the first date and the maximum is the last date, right? So that's not going to work either. So we do this attribute. Attribute essentially just means one and only one within a partition, right? So that's saying if the anchor date equals this one and only one date within that partition, then return the sales. And that's what we want. And that's what we want, right? So we'll click on that, we'll click OK, and that's working just fine. Now we'll duplicate this, and we will simply go in here and we'll do the exact same thing. The only thing we'll do is we'll change out our parameter date. As opposed to being anchor date, it'll be the comparison date. This is the exact same function. And then we'll call this comparison date sales. Right? So now what we'll do is we'll drag measure names to filters, and we'll just bring in those anchor date and comparison date sales. Measure values is going to go on to our secondary axis. And you can see here real quick right now, Tableau is, there we go. Tableau has drawn my lines for me, right? It's drawn my dots, but it's not connecting the dots. Why is it not connecting the dots? Well, because Tableau will try to default anytime you have a line chart, your line mark type, it will try to draw a line based on your dimension, right? So it's trying to draw a line between the dates, but it can't because we don't have any values for each date, all right? So you can imagine if we had null dates in our sales data, the line would break. That's what you can imagine, right? So we have to tell Tableau how to connect the points. By default, it's trying to do it by date. That's not how we want. What we actually want is to draw the line between measure values. So we'll do that. We'll drop this on the path card the path shelf of the marks card. And there we have it. And now we have our lines, right? While we're here, before we go crazy and do a bunch of other things, let's go ahead and drag. Let's hold down Command or Control, depending on your operating system, on category, and drag that to color. That looks good. Okay. So now what we can do, let's go ahead now, we can make this a dual axis, and we will synchronize. There we go. That looks good. All right, we'll leave that like that for now. And now we can get rid of this null indicator here. Just hide it, because if we try to filter it, things will get bad. We don't want that. We don't want things to go bad, right? Okay, let's see. I want to find a date that has positive and negative. Here, let's go here. Let's do that. And well, let's do something in the middle. That looks good. Nope. I got to remember I can't click. I've just got to not hover on it, right? There we go. That looks good. Okay. We'll leave that like that. And now we're ready to figure out how to do the... we got to figure out how to show the labels and show them correctly. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a calculated field. And we'll call this the percent change. And that calculated field is this right here. I'll bump this up for everyone, and then we'll talk about it. Okay, so what we're saying here is, and I'll bring this into the center of the screen here. If the comparison date is equal to the attribute of the truncated week of order date, right? We've used that. We just talked about it. So that shouldn't be an issue. If those two are the same, then what do we want? We want you to do basically the percent change of calculation, which is the comparison date, the quantity of the comparison date sales minus the anchor date sales divided by the anchor date sales. What does that mean? What is happening? Well, let's talk about this. So one, we know that we got to have attribute. We got to be aggregated. But if you recall in our statement, in what we just talked about, comparison date is already going to be aggregated, right? Because it's a table calculation. The result of the comparison date sales calculated field is already aggregate. So why am I wrapping it in a window minimum function? Why am I wrapping each one of these in a window min? Well, the reason why is because the rolling dates are on separate partitions, right? So if you can imagine, right? There we go. So you have your comparison date partition is up here, and your anchor date partition is right here. So when we tell Tableau to take the difference between these two partitions, Tableau can't do it because they're not on the same level, right? They're not on the same row. Tableau can't do that. So we've got to figure out a way to get everything from this partition and this partition on the same row or set of rows so that it can do that, so that it can do the math. And the way that we do that is by wrapping all of that in a window min or a window max. Either one is going to give us what we want. So essentially what this does is it takes this partition and puts it on every single row. So now whenever I tell Tableau to take the difference between these two partitions, because they're on the same level, Tableau can do it, right? So that's what this function is doing. Now what we need to do is on our measure values marked card, take that percent of change and drag it onto label. Right? And then we'll change this into a percentage, number format, percentage, 1 decimal place, and then we need to bring in our triangles. And you can see I use them a lot, so they're already ready to go. So we have positive, semicolon, negative, 0.0, Get rid of our triangle, get rid of our symbol viewer. We'll click OK, and what you'll see right here, this 0.458, whenever I click OK, you're going to see that turn into a percent of one decimal place, and you'll see a up arrow to signify this is a positive change. There we go. And there we go, right? So I changed it because of the hover, and that's okay. So we got up 15%, down 66%, and down 46.9% for each of the different categories, right? So then what we'll do is we'll just do our font to match our mark color. We'll bring up the size of those. Maybe make them, there we go, make it bold. Oh, that looks good. And there we have it, right? And then we just need to clean up some tooltips, clean up our formatting, put it on a dashboard, and we're ready to go. But this is how you can use parameter actions to calculate the difference between any 2 points on a trend line. So, thank you so much for watching. I hope you really enjoyed this video. Check out some of my other videos. Be sure to check in. I do a weekly live stream every Friday around 10 a.m. Central Time. And we do one of these. You get to see me struggle a little bit more because during my live streams, I've not looked at the challenges and I have not attempted the challenges. And then I do these clean videos for my other videos. So get to clean it up. So if I struggle during the live stream, it's a good way to kind of show you how I think about Tableau and how I approach Tableau. And tune in, give me a like, give me a follow. Appreciate everybody tuning in, and we'll see you on the next video. Go forth and viz.